introduce there we go, our first session. And so what I'd like to do is, if we need any time for that presenter to get ready, we can do that now. I would think that she should be able to share. So Rebecca, if you are ready, we're going to get started a little early, because in the virtual world, the welcome doesn't need 15 minutes. That's one of the lessons I learned over the last couple of years. It sounds important, but it's probably a little more than we need. So Rebecca, if you want to just give me a thumbs up or let me know when you're ready, I will do a nice introduction and get you started.
Yeah, is it okay to go ahead and share my screen then and get that up?
That would be totally fine.
All right. Wait just a second.
No, take your time.
All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Ooh, I can see it. Yep, I think we're good.
All right. Perfect.
All right, well, let me get you started. So our first session today, Rebecca Eaton is the coordinator of library services at the Galesburg Library on the main campus of Carl Sandburg College. She'll be presenting Supporting Students Through Equitable Tech Lending, covering the expansion and improvement of a technology lending program at her institution for both, two students, both during the pandemic and beyond. You'd think I would have done that a little smoother, Rebecca, since I wrote it myself, but that's okay. Well, we can figure that out later. A big welcome to Rebecca Eaton.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. Like he said, I'm Rebecca. It's good to see everyone here today. Thanks for joining us. Today, my goal is to tell the story of how we created a more equitable tech lending program at Sandburg Library. So what I've heard from other libraries in the past is that there's a lot of hesitation around building a program like ours because of the money and the staff time that it takes. So I'm really hoping that this dispels some of that and can act as a guide to create similar programs at your institutions if this is something you're interested in. Oops, there we go. All right, so a little bit about Carl Sandburg College to understand who we are. We're a two-year public community college in Galesburg, Illinois, and our student headcount as of fall 2021 was 1687, and we have an FTE of about 1044. According to the most recent IPEDS report published, our students, 76% of them are 24 and under, 24% are 25 and over. However, dual credit enrollment accounts for a lot of that 24 and under. So the age of our students that we actually see on campus looks a little bit different than that. It was also reported that 42% of our students were enrolled only in distance education that year, and 41% were enrolled in at least some distance education. So this was even pre-COVID, just to give you some context. So much of our student population in general is remote, non-traditional, and low income. And again, just to understand more about us, it's important to know our library's culture. So we have a history of not being seen as particularly helpful on campus. And so to try to get over that hump and really build better relationships with campus, over probably the past 5 or 6 years, our mantra has really been to say yes as much as possible. So we do everything within reason to help assist our students. And technically, this is unofficially, we haven't had any fines or overdue fees since 2015. And while we don't widely advertise that, as soon as students find that out, they absolutely love it. And anecdotally, it has helped increase our return rates and build trust with our student base. Sandburg's Tech Help Desk is located in the library. So this has been kind of a good and a bad thing for us over the years. We're the first people that students see when they need tech help. So because of that, library staff took initiative over the past couple of years to cross-train ourselves with basic tech help duties. That way we can help students at that point of contact, and then they don't have to wait for tech help to be available. And this really helps with our lending program as well. Another important thing about us, so that you can kind of understand scalability of this, we only have 3 full-time staff members, no part-time staff members. We are lucky when we have 1 student worker to help with lunch coverage. So it's just the 3 of us doing our regular library duties and then also, running this program. Our tech lending program really started in late 2013. At this point, we just had laptops and iPads. They came from other departments, so it wasn't really anything purchased by us. And they were only for in-library use. And it wasn't until fall of 2017 that we began checking laptops and Chromebooks out to students for off-campus use. And again, a lot of this was just, things that had been recycled from other departments and repurposed. The checkout duration at the beginning was only for 1 week, and in spring 2018, that was increased to 2 weeks. We had a very small inventory at the time, so because of that, and really the purpose of the program at the time was just to temporarily assist students with device lending. It wasn't really meant to be a permanent thing that students were able to use throughout an entire semester. However, as we all know, students don't just need a device for 2 weeks. When funding is a source of concern or financial concerns for students, it's really hard to go out and justify buying, a $300 to $600 device, depending on what you're buying. So what ended up happening is that we were extremely flexible with renewals. And so what was supposed to be just a 2-week checkout with renewals available really turned into sort of this, students could kind of keep it out as long as they wanted to. Again, caused some problems, but was also really beneficial for students as well. In spring 2020, January 2020, we decided we were going to beta test having these checkout durations be sort of permanently for 1 semester. And we all know what happened in March 2020. COVID shut everything down. We really didn't get a chance to really do a formal beta test and see if this was going to help anybody, what our return process was going to look like, because at that point it was chaos. So some context about what happened with our program. It's kind of a funny story. When our campus was on lockdown, library staff were not allowed on campus at all. So IT actually took control of our lending program, the campus lending program anyways, and they were using a paper tracking system. So students had to fill out a loan agreement form. These forms were then placed in a folder. As you can imagine, over a few months, that folder ended up lost. When we eventually found it, a lot of that paperwork was missing. And yeah, I think it's fair to say that our IT staff were very happy when we took the lending program back over when we returned to campus. We just have a better tracking system, that's an integral part of our services. So naturally, there was a low return rate for anything that was checked out during the pandemic via that paper tracking system, unfortunately. But we did actually get a lot of our stuff back through like a drop-in drive-in service that students could come up and return their devices to us over the summer. Outside, we had masks and gloves and all that fun stuff. But when we came back from the COVID shutdown, our IT staff had essentially said, like, never again. We're not doing this ever again. So in fall 2021, we naturally ended up becoming the central tech lending hub for campus. Because come to find out, like, we were also not the only department on campus really doing a lending program. So we had our tutoring center, we have our TRIO UBMS center doing lending specifically for those students. And we also had the Center for Manufacturing Excellence lending devices occasionally. So it's just kind of this chaotic mix of everybody doing their own thing, and nobody really knew where to send students. And so because of our tracking system and just naturally how we check items out to students anyways, and because we had a more robust program than the other departments, they just said, okay, let's let the library do this. And so now every time somebody needs something, they just send them to the library. So it's been really beneficial for everyone, not just students. All right. So you're probably wondering, how did we get all these devices, because it can be an expensive endeavor. It really can. But we were extremely fortunate that we had really built these positive relationships with other departments and also proven ourselves that, we were good to be this tech lending hub. So from 2013 to 2018, we mostly started with devices that were retired from other departments. It wasn't until summer 2018 that we really started purchasing our own devices. At this point, IT purchased half of the 30 that were purchased, and then with library funds, we purchased the other 15. And so you can tell on the timing, this was end of fiscal year funds, which had also worked out then the next year because we were able to purchase 10 new laptops to replace our old ones, which were no longer functional at all. When we naturally ran out of inventory for laptops, our IT staff had repurposed some old laptops from around campus, and then they increased the RAM and the storage space on those devices so that we at least had something to give students. But to give you an idea of how slow some of them were, we had a student who reported she was falling asleep trying to wait for QuickBooks to open. So we don't want students falling asleep waiting for 15 minutes for a program to open. We want them to be able to use these things. So in spring 2020, before the COVID shutdown, we ended up purchasing some new Chromebooks because at that point, we were completely wiped out of all inventory. This is how popular this program had been for students. And also when the COVID shutdown happened, there was actually a semi-low percentage of students who ended up requesting devices from the IT lending program because they already had devices from the library. So this just goes to show like how valuable this program was for students and how much use they were getting out of it. So because we had this narrative that was built up, flash forward to 2021, everything's semi back to normal, for what it's worth. IT had purchased a couple of different rounds of devices for us, which amounted to 108 Chromebooks and 35 laptops in total. And not only did they purchase these devices for us, this round they ended up getting storage carts for us and really any accessories that we needed, like bags and chargers. A lot of this was done with CARES funding and other IT funds that were left over. So we haven't had to touch that part of our budget in a while, even though we have actually set aside a budget for maintenance, repairs, and inventory at this point because the program's grown so much. Right? So as you can imagine, when we started getting all these devices, it's a lot to keep track of, a lot. And once you get it going though, it's not so bad because then you can just continue to maintain your devices. So first, we keep everything in a separate inventory on an Excel sheet so that we have a master copy of all the devices. That way, if something's lost, withdrawn, or just simply moved to another area temporarily, we can keep track of that. But we also keep track of it in Alma, our catalog. And we would check it out to students just like we would any other library material. And it's worked really well because then they get automated notices when things are going to be due. And we can also control, how long those checkout durations are too, which is nice. All right, so pictured here is the back of one of our Chromebooks. So each device has an IT tag on the back of it. It's a little hard to read there, but each one has information about where folks can send these if a device is lost. So we actually had a student leave one at a doctor's office one time, and then luckily the front desk staff there was kind enough to return it to us. But if we hadn't had that information there, chances are that could have been lost and we never would have seen it again. And the student would have probably been charged for it, which is never good. So on these, we also have a unique barcode for Alma cataloging. So each one does have its own separate unique barcode, and that's also added in our inventory so that, say we ever leave or say these are returned, because this happens a lot where, the barcodes or any kind of sticker is worn off and has come off the device. Then what we can do is look that up in the inventory and look up its service tag number, and we can put new labels on it as needed, which is really handy. Our front desk assistant also came up with this handy idea that we would use color-coded tape for the charger type, because we had so many models and so many different device types that were coming in at one time that it just got confusing very quickly over like, oh, which charger do we give this student? And in the beginning, we actually had given out the wrong charger a couple of times, but this just makes it so much easier on staff, makes the process so much more efficient. And then you'll see in the next slide that we have storage boxes for these chargers that then have the color-coded tape so that we can tell which one it is. And then not pictured in this is the front of the device. Each one has its own device like number label on the front. And this just tells us, which storage card it needs to be returned to. And then it's just yet another identifier that we have in case, we lose any of the tags and whatnot from the device. All right. So yes, storage. I wish I could tell you this was all all of our storage space for these. But we have, I believe, 7 carts in total. They are all labeled according to what is inside them between device type and which numbers are in that inventory. Just again, makes life so much more simpler and easy. They do stay locked at all times, just to make sure that, if anything is left unattended, we don't have any theft. These also are all really nice because if you can find storage carts that have sort of a tabletop surface, it also is functional storage, right? As you can see, we store a lot of our cleaning supplies or office supplies on top of them, and things like that. And so again, functional space. We also have to keep quite a bit of room for all of our laptop and Chromebook bags. The laptop and Chromebook bags actually are important because students will then put a device in their backpack, and next thing you know, you have a lot of cracked screens happening. So as much as we didn't necessarily think that was going to be an essential part of our lending program at one time, it really was. We also make sure that we have plenty of chargers on hand, because the last thing that you want to be messing with is taking chargers in and out of those carts. It's not the most fun thing in the world, and students don't look particularly thrilled when they have to wait for that either. We also keep spare parts in our bag storage space, because then, if a device is no longer working, we still have screens, we have keyboards, we have batteries that we can use to refurbish another one that comes in if it's been damaged in any way, but still otherwise works. All right. So, after acquiring inventory, of course, you want to market your program. And so pre-COVID, we advertised this service at every table that we hosted for orientations, student events, and we really hope to do that again soon when things get back to some semblance of normal. We also list this service in new student brochures. It's not only on the library site, but this program has become so popular on campus that our overall college website added this to our tech programs as well. We also list it in new student brochures, and then also on the college catalog and course syllabi. So really anything that's informational that's going out to new students or to students enrolling in a program, it's there and they know that the service is available. We also send out reminders to tutoring, advising, and faculty, really anybody who's directly involved with students who will need a device. for their classes, and then they'll directly refer students to the library, or they'll use something called Starfish referrals. If you are familiar with Starfish, we use that on campus, and then faculty, advisors, they're able to directly send that referral to the student, which also comes to us. So we can follow up with the student and make sure they got what they needed. And also just like after doing all of this other work, and once we had students coming in, word of mouth, it spread like wildfire, and we were constantly trying to play catch up, trying to expand inventory to make sure that all students were supported. So our checkout policies have really evolved over time, but our current policies are that students have to sign a loan agreement, and then we keep that on file for their full tenure at Sandburg, because we don't really want to keep bugging them. You know, it's just yet another barrier to get them that access. We do put a note in their library account in Alma so that we don't have to continue asking, and, you know, we don't have to remember, you know, hundreds of students who have signed these. Students also now have to show proof of need for a laptop versus a Chromebook. This first started because of we had such low inventory for laptops, but now it's really more of a financial thing, because we not only don't like want to lose $700 worth of equipment, we also don't want to potentially have to charge that to a student, because again, that's another barrier to access. And how they show proof of this is they can give us their course schedule. So if they're taking a course that requires like Microsoft Office Suite, the desktop version, or you know, like SimBio or other course software, they'll really need a laptop versus a Chromebook. But we also do this for accessibility. So of course we want to be accommodating for anybody who might have a learning disability or who might be non-traditional and have issues learning how to use a Chromebook versus a laptop. So this academic year, we did crack down on renewals. We no longer allow renewals between spring and the summer session, because what we found is that students would then like either drop classes, or they would forget about the device over the summer, or they would start to think of it like their personal device. And so we would get things back in not so great condition sometimes. Now students must also wait 1 week until classes start to borrow a device, because what we ran into issues with was students would check out a device, you know, a month before classes start, they would withdraw, and then we would never see them again. So unfortunately, that does lead to theft, and it's something to be aware of. But honestly, since we started this new checkout policy, it's been a lot better. We haven't run into these issues this academic year. Now, several of our current checkout policies were implemented to increase our return rate, but some other measures we've taken include, you know, contacting coaches and advisors for athletes and international students. That usually gets their attention, and they'll return the device or renew it. When device loans, you know, are either active or overdue, they do get a block placed on their student account. We use DataTel for our student information system here. And so we can go in and put a hold on their account. This keeps them from requesting transcripts, registering for classes. And something we implemented this semester is like, now they can't even drop classes until they return the device, because our return rate this last time around was we had 5 devices out of over 100, we had 5 devices that weren't returned, and they were all due to students withdrawing from Sandburg. So we worked with advisors to really set these new policies. And so now advisors have clear communication, and so they know exactly what they're supposed to do on their end to tell students, hey, you need to take care of this or I can't drop you. We had several devices returned the past couple of weeks because drop was yesterday. And so we were able to get that taken care of. Worked like a charm. We also learned that we needed to provide an alternative drop-off location outside library hours, because it wasn't always accessible for students to get here during our library hours. So for us, that drop-off location is public safety, because they're here every day, pretty much any hour, 24/7. So that's helped quite a bit as well, because then students don't feel pressured to get in, you know, like during their work schedule or when they have their kids with them. We also learned that we needed to define a due date and enforce it. Flexibility is awesome. It's great for everybody, but students really need like a strict schedule to enforce, or else, yeah, they're just going to keep either taking advantage of it, or they're going to just completely forget that it's not theirs. And yeah, it caused some problems with the flexibility. But again, defining a very direct due date, enforcing it has helped a lot. Um, we don't charge late fees for replacement parts for accidental damage. If your budget can afford this, this is a great thing to do, because students are often afraid that if they return something with any kind of damage, even if it's like, we had somebody whose dog chewed on a charger, they were so scared to return their device because they thought they were going to get in a lot of trouble because their dog chewed up a charger. We we don't care about the dog chewing up the charger. Life happens. We've had students with children who have, accidentally cracked a screen. We just ended up covering that, and we ended up replacing the screen, and it really was no big deal. Life happens. We're not going to punish somebody for that. But yeah, making that clear to students, again, has helped so much. Future improvements that I plan on implementing in the near future are sending long overdue items to collections. We haven't done this in the past simply because it wasn't built into our loan agreement, and we didn't want to do something that students weren't already aware of was going to happen. We did get permission from our admin and our business office to do this. So we have it in place and ready to go in the future, and students would get 2 notices before it officially goes to collections. So it would just be yet another strategy to really push them to return that instead of avoiding the conflict. We also learned that, this happens a lot, especially with younger students. We often wrongly assume that they're automatically computer literate. This is not true. And they need additional support with the devices that they borrow. So in the future, we may start hosting workshops on Chromebook and laptop basics, or at least creating some LibGuides that have quick troubleshooting tips or information about how to do some of those basic functions. What I really want to leave you with, though, and I love these so much, are student testimonials. And they're not only heartwarming, but they remind us how much this program means, not just to the students, but also to their families. So we do allow dual credit students to have the same access of any other student. And so we had a parent call about a renewal, and this top one was from the parent. She says, "I'm so glad you did this for our students. This saved us from needing to buy a laptop for our daughter this year." And that just, as a parent myself, that hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, that would be something stressful to worry about. We had another student who pretty much borrowed a laptop for almost 3 years straight, who says, "I don't have a computer at home, and this device has been a blessing for my online medical terminology class." We probably had about 3 different emails from the student saying this was such a blessing and a lifesaver. Um, and then one of my favorites was that, 2 students came in together, and one student had been using her kids' device that they had during remote learning. And so this whole family was sharing one device, and that obviously was not working very well. And her friend brings her in and says to our library assistant, "Can you believe she was going to buy a $600 computer?" Like that whole, "That's crazy. Why would you do that when you can get one from the library for free?" So yeah, she came in, and that just tells you how strong word of mouth marketing is too for us. So yeah, I hope that, between the testimonials and the story of how we've built our program inspires a lot of you to try this at your own institutions, and that this is maybe giving you some tips for the future. But we are always happy to answer any questions, either in the chat right now. I know we might be running a little behind on time. I apologize for that. But then also outside of this conference, I am more than happy to chat with you about this.
Well, Thank you, Rebecca. We are doing just fine on time, and that was very very good. I will say, I know just from my personal experience, certainly during the pandemic time, I'm actually housed in IT, and so I got to see it from that perspective. But I can tell you, it was our library that was the champion of doing this kind of distribution for students. And I saw it in your testimonials, but I just know, we're looking for student success, and there's so much technology in everything that we do today. And not to have a device, or to have, I mean, we certainly heard the stories of one device and six people trying to utilize it, and that's just tough. I also heard the stories of six devices, and that being an internet problem versus a physical device problem, but there were lots of good stories. um Rebecca, if you're okay, I'm happy to open it up if people wanted to ask any questions today. I think that the story and your experience is really valuable.
Thanks. Yeah, we're happy to take any questions. And real quick too, I meant to mention this. We do have a device lending LibGuide where students can use a request form to request remotely. They don't have to come to the library for it. And it also has just some troubleshooting tips, information about our loan agreement form. So in case this is helpful to anyone, I'm going to put that in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you. So there is a couple things in the chat already here. Um, are you a Google school? Heather wanted to know.
What's interesting is no. So we're a Microsoft Office school, and a lot of our school districts surrounding us, K through 12s, are Google schools. And so when they come here, they don't know what to do with a laptop or a desktop for Microsoft Office.
Yes.
And they're always wondering, like, how do I get Google Drive to work with this? So that's been an interesting challenge too.
Ellen says they are in the process of moving technology loans to the library right now, and she'll reach out to you with questions. So there you go. And then another one, how do you handle the wiping and updating of the devices when they are returned?
That's a great question. So that's another thing that why it was important to understand that we kind of took on some tech help responsibilities. So we learned a lot of this from our tech help. So we already had a system down where we would wipe devices when they came back. And then for Chromebooks, this is really easy because you just do, I believe it's Control, I need to look at a keyboard for reference, Control Alt Shift R, and it's a reset or power wash. And so what we do is we do the power wash, and then we check for updates on the devices before we even put them back in the cart. And then we routinely check for updates too through the summer. This used to be like a tech help student worker responsibility, but I don't know how student worker situations are going at other institutions. We haven't had a lot of luck, so we've been doing all of this. And then for laptops, they're a little more difficult. We used to manually go through and remove everything. So we would remove logins, passwords, it was crazy the things that were saved on those devices when they came back. Like, we do not want access to this later. So our IT guys showed us how to use a CCleaner on it. And so now our front desk staff uses a CCleaner whenever something comes back, and then does all of the Windows updates before putting it back in the cart.
You mentioned some hardware things like having extra screens, or dealing with that. Is that something that the IT staff is taking care of? Or are you guys even involved in that?
I do it, but I'm also a tech nerd.
Wow.
So
Oh,
I don't
okay.
expect anybody to actually take on their own hardware responsibilities in their libraries. But personally, I enjoy doing it. I like working with my hands. I also run our makerspace. So like
Ah,
that was a no-brainer for me. But if it's something that's a little more complicated, like if the motherboard needs checked or the hard drive or something, that definitely goes to IT. They do that. They've also been absolutely wonderful when we came back from the COVID shutdown, and have covered a lot of our maintenance expenses. So like for replacement screens and whatnot. And again, we have received a lot of support simply because it's a good program for students.
I should have figured that was you. You said that so confidently when you just offhandedly said we'll replace a screen, and I was like, wow.
It's actually
That's
a
really
lot
cool.
easier than it sounds. You just have to
Yes.
have the right tools, but yeah.
Yes. And another one to put in there.
Yes, that and we found that screen protectors have worked really well too. We were a little worried that with the price of them that they wouldn't work very well, but yeah, we haven't had problems since putting screen protectors on a few of them.
Nice. Another question in the chat. Ellen asked, would you be willing to share the loan agreement?
Yeah, actually, I can grab that direct link for you, but if you open up that LibGuide link that I have in the chat, I'm trying to open it myself real quick. There is a Sandburg Library laptop / Chromebook request form, and that has all the information that we give students on the paper form too. We're actually going to be doing away with paper forms as of this summer, just because it's cumbersome to keep that binder. And if we do the electronic forms, it automatically sends a receipt of that agreement form to the student, because we always ask them, do you want a copy of this agreement form? They're like, no. So,
And then I know earlier I did have someone ask if you were okay to share the PowerPoint.
oh yeah. Are there going to be materials sent out to attendees
Yeah,
after?
I think you know what, we can coordinate that as the committee, and so we'll make sure and reach out, and we can pair that with the recordings.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I will. Should I send that to you then, Scott, or someone else?
Me is fine,
Okay,
and otherwise we'll reach out to you if that's an issue.
no problem.
All right, Tom wants to know, how would you describe the library's relationship with the IT department? It sounds pretty good from what I've heard so far.
From what I have learned from other libraries, we have a very unique relationship with our IT staff. So our IT director is my office neighbor. So pretty much right there all the time. Most of the IT staff who aren't back end work upstairs in our library. So their offices are here. They're also just like really goofy and fun to work with. Um, so like we have a shared word wall in our break room. We can go to them with anything that we need. They'll even interrupt their lunch breaks to come out and help us with tech help questions that we can't understand. So yeah, I understand that we are in a unique position. And so some of the things I've mentioned here may not be entirely possible, but it has also helped. So with us taking on extra tech help responsibilities, that has also really improved our relationship with them. And so because we're willing to put in that extra work to help them, they're more than happy to help us too.
Do you think proximity is what made that possible? Because they kind of, in that shared space, can commiserate with you a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the history went there. I was lucky enough that when I was hired here, that relationship already existed. And so we've just continued to maintain it.
Well, that's pretty great.
Yeah. I wish it was that way for everybody.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unless there's any other last minute questions, I'd like to say thank you very much, Rebecca. This has been fantastic, and thank you for your willingness to share. And I think you touch on an experience I'm sure a lot of us, myself included, have had to learn a lot about in not necessarily the best situation. But I think it does go a long way towards student success, which I know is what we're all here to do. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Or Scott. I'm sorry.
Nope,
Read the
that's
wrong.
okay. I've been called worse.
Oh,
All right. And let me quickly paste the survey link into the chat. And then what I would like to tell you. So let me grab this. You can see Scott can't multitask very well. All right. So there's that. Thank you again to Rebecca. And What I will say is our next session is not scheduled until 10:15. So you have a little bit of time. As Jeff mentioned early on, you are welcome to leave yourself here in the Zoom session and just mute your mic or turn off your camera and then come back as we approach 10:15, which is the time for our next session. Let me remind you what that one is going to be. That'll be some friends from Illinois Central College talking about plugging into Canvas, innovation through equitable course material delivery. So they're scheduled to begin at 10:15. Again, you're welcome to hang out here. Otherwise, feel free to come on back. It's the same Zoom link for the entire conference. All right. And you can also let us know in the chat if there's anything else you need logistically, but feel free to use that link to the Google form and fill out the quick survey on our first session today.